Firebreather is an American graphic novel series produced by Image Comics, and you've likely never read this shit, yet he ended up being a side character to Invincible for some time, before getting tossed in the shallow grave of a Cartoon Network movie in 2010, which I have reviewed, and as I'll be talking about the differences, you should probably check that out. Aside from the movie being a core memory in most people's brains, I realized that no one has read this damn comic. I'll admit, I didn't read any of it until the making of this video, and I have to say the comic is far superior. Like, now watching the movie, I can't help but notice them change a bunch of shit that I simply can't agree with. They took a high quality story about adolescent drama and turned it into fucking Mean Girls. That being said, I'll be talking more about the differences between the comic and the movie adaptation. I won't be getting too specific in my breakdown to encourage people to actually read the comic, so take your hand out of your pants, grab some popcorn, and lock in. We start much like the movie, in a flashback 15 years before Duncan was born. His father, Balak, is wiping a city off the map when he happens to spot a woman who's tripped after running away and screaming in terror. In place of fear, he gets a friendly greeting, and it's heavily implied that Duncan's mother let this kaiju clap on the first date. We cut to Duncan, who seems to be like 6, asking if his father will be back for Christmas, and his mother says Balak has important business in Tokyo, which is fucking hilarious to me. Now, finally, the present day, and it goes basically the same as the class introduction scene from the movie, with two very key differences. Liz does not exist. That's right, your favorite ship for the main character isn't anything more than a headcanon for the movie producers. And it's weird, because Jenna, who's actually a good character in the comics, suspiciously has all the traits of Liz. It's kind of like they took her character from the comic and split her into Jenna and Liz for the movie. The minute he's introduced to the class, he gets called to the principal's office, and the principal starts grilling this nigga. He mentions that he doesn't have a date of birth, he mentions that his race is blank, and he also mentions that Duncan has gotten kicked out of 5 schools in 4 years, and rightfully calls him a delinquent. On his way out, he runs into Jenna, and we find out in this iteration she's not the student council president, she's more of like a counselor for the entire school, and she tries to get Duncan to open up to other people more about his past. The conversation ends with him giving the classic early 2000s high school hierarchy speech, and Jenna basically tells him that's bullshit and he should stop being so narcissistic, which is why she's so much of a better character in this version. Just a couple more dimensions than the stereotypical blonde nutsock we got in the movie. And by the way, did you catch the second key difference? That's right, Kenny was not in that classroom. We only get to see him when Duncan fails at sitting with any other social group at lunch and notices someone has a table all to themselves. He sits down and dumps out his bag to reveal lumps of coal. Had Kenny cracking the fuck up. Interestingly enough, he specifically tells Duncan to call him Ken instead of Kenny. He has a bad dream that night and wakes up to crush his mirror, and the comic version of the Goon Squad plot on Duncan's downfall. And the last couple pages of issue 1 has Barnes with a bionic arm fucking killing Balak and Duncan at the same time, which quickly gets revealed to be just a holographic simulation. I have no idea why they chose to remove the bionic arm for the movie. And they took all of my man's drip. Imagine how hard a cowboy hat in 3D would be. The next day, we get shown a very different dodgeball scene than the movie. Honestly, Duncan is just standing in the middle of the court while the Goon Squad are decimating niggas with rubber balls. Like, Troy's putting his entire back into this shit. Oh, by the way, did I forget to mention this is Troy Adams. Nigga's shirt off, locked in. He doinks bro in the back so hard that his glasses snap in half. And as the ball bounces towards Duncan, he just plugs it and sends Troy to an emergency room. On the way out of the nurse's office, he runs into Troy's alcoholic stepfather, berating him for being dog shit in dodgeball, I guess. He threatens Duncan, and Troy reassures his father that he'll get his get back himself. Barnes lands the helicarrier on the school football field. Yeah, in the comics, nothing is really a secret. Everyone knows about Balak and that Duncan is like the son of Balak. Interestingly enough, the United Nations actually put in laws and agreements to let him live a regular life. Also, Barnes is picking up Duncan to take him to his father's for the weekend. So yet another key difference, Balak is not a deadbeat in any way, shape, or form. He sees his kid every weekend. And the scene from when he was 6 implies that he at least spends Christmas with them sometimes. Duncan sets foot inside of Balak's lair, and instead of the damp goon cave he was living in the movies, this nigga resides in Playboy Mansion in the comics. Duncan notices a Da Vinci painting he's never seen, and Balak just casually tells him that no one has in like 300 years. And kind of in place of the lava pit scene, Balak just sprays Duncan with fire, gives him some of that ancient dragon dripped forged by the gods, and informs them that they'll be doing some training. And in the start of issue 3, he's hanging upside down from a rock, surprised to realize upon waking up that he isn't fatigued at all. His father smashes the cliff he was hanging onto, burying him alive in debris. He gets up and shrugs that shit off without even a scratch. Balak tells him to fight and kill some random kaiju, much like the canyon scene in the movie, except this one ends with Duncan literally crying and asking to go home. Barnes drops him off at his mother's, and we see the beast he fought earlier waiting outside their home. Meanwhile, Troy is putting a gun in his waistband, preparing himself for whatever plan he has to up the score on Duncan. Now, when Duncan gets to school the next day, he's greeted by Jenna, who insists he does this little peer counseling thing and gets set up in a room with Kenny. So they sit down, right? And Duncan is giving Kenny the most generic advice ever, like, take a shower and maybe people would fuck with you more. And Kenny replies that there isn't a shower at the cabin he lives in. Duncan questions him further about why he lives in a cabin and gets Kenny to admit his father is unbelievably abusive. He used to beat him until he got big enough to fight back and then resorted to attacking him while he was sleeping, to the point of once breaking his foot, thus sleeps in the cabin to avoid him, which gives a lot of context to the movie. Duncan, stunned by this information, asks Kenny how this makes him feel, and when he replies with a vaguely suicidal remark, Duncan tries to discourage that idea before Kenny leaves the room. Duncan meets back up with Jenna, realizing that he doesn't have it as bad as some others. But in the middle of that entire, heartfelt conclusion, they find a gun in Duncan's locker, planted by Troy Adams the night before. The principal grills him about it, and he mentions that his fingers can't even fit the trigger. The principal is pretty apprehensive to believe him, so he flies off in a storm of rage. He goes to the usual local desert in order to smash boulders out of anger, and Jenna shows up a little while later. They cleared up the whole situation with the gun with relative ease, and convince Duncan to come back with them. But when Jenna pulls up to Duncan's house to drop him off, half of it is completely destroyed, and his mother is missing. So Duncan, of course, puts on his armor and goes to track her down, using his wings for the first time in the series, in kind of a similar scene to the movie where he rescued Barnes. As he's flying over the area, he sees the thing that kidnapped his mother, and he drop kicks it from the sky, causing his mother to be flung from its hand and land on her fucking head. And as he's distracted by the concern for his mother, Duncan gets punched by that fucking kaiju thing. I think this came out before Avengers, but this feels like a Hulk reference, doesn't it? Bro gets broken the fuck up and laid on the floor, and only when his mother intervenes to try to help does he get up and actually try to beat its ass. He tries to get his mother to safety, but ends up distracted in the process again, and almost gets his arm bitten clean off. He struggles a while to get his arm back before just breathing fire on it, and the minute he gets his hand free, he flies up higher and burns it to a crisp, grabs a pointy rock from nearby and almost ends its life. Yet again bitches out due to his mother's intervention, but it doesn't matter because he gets killed anyway the second Block shows up, and insists he was gearing up for a counterattack. Barnes shows up to take Duncan to the hospital and try to fuck Margaret again, and convinces Block to just leave the situation alone and go back home. The next day we see Duncan come back to his father's lair, with a real confrontational vibe. You see, he's figured out that Block set up that entire situation as a theatrical play to get him to see the error in his ways, which failed, by the way, and tells Balak if he ever puts his mother in danger again that he will kill him, unlike the kaiju that was actually putting your mother in danger. And that concludes the entirety of the 4-issue 2003 Firebreather comic, which was kind of fucking goated. I actually suggest you just read it because I didn't tell a lot of the jokes that they told in the little dialogues. Besides this, there is the Iron Saint, the 2008 storyline, and the Home Gang storyline, which are all direct continuations. Damn near all the source material for the movie came from the 2003 original, with the Iron Saint storyline I think being a time skip, and the 2008 storyline, All Heroes Are Orphans, is what I suspect they would use for the second movie had they actually made one. But the Home Gang storyline, that was made in 2010 with the movie, and it kind of changes the original story to make more sense with the movie. I think they were trying to have it run parallel to whatever animated series they were trying to make, but they don't really do anything meaningful outside of adding a character that's supposed to be the parallel to Isabella in the movie. But we're out of time for today. I'll go over the other storylines and how he gets wrapped up with Invincible in another video. So like, subscribe, and stay tuned.